Hey everyone, Carl here with Literate Lessons, bringing you a deep dive featuring Yveltal and Groudon this week. Yveltal and Groudon tied with Zacian and Palkia, Lightsaber, as we'll call them probably for a little while. So I figured we would cover Yveltal Groudon first, and then we'll talk about Lightsaber next week. The poll will still be up. It will be voting for 2 Fridays from now. There will be, I think we're probably putting Swordfish on there if we haven't covered that already. Maybe Kyurem White might show up. We got a whole lot of ideas and things like that for duos to come forward. But before we get started covering Yveltal and Groudon, make sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications for when new videos go live, and let's just get started on Yveltal Groudon. We all know what Yveltal does. We talked about Yveltal about 2 weeks ago. This very bulky, very offensive-oriented, really good speed tier, restricted, has access to max airstream. You could be this mixed attacker with Foul Play and Sucker Punch. You have Heat Wave, you have Oblivion Wing for recovery, you have Snarl for damage reduction, you have Tailwind if you really want to do that and not play Assault Vest. Like, the options really are endless for Yveltal. But what makes it great with this Groudon team is it's just Groudon's a really good check for Yveltal's weakness in Electric, which the Pokemon you have to really fear are like Thundurus and Regieleki, and Groudon checks both of those really, really well. And Yveltal kind of helps against opposing like Kyogre. Yveltal can outspeed Kyogre fairly easily without Kyogre having Tailwind up or being Scarf. And having access to that Snarl and that Sucker Punch and that really kind of just bulky 98 special defense and 126 HP means that you're not taking a ton of hits from Kyogre, but you can at least take one good Water Spout and get a Snarl off, or get a max airstream off, and then you outspeed Kyogre for sure, and then you can just start to whittle it away and whittle down on it. As for the set we're going to talk about today, this is probably the most common Yveltal set right now. This is Timid 188 speed, gets you to 157, which outspeeds all base 90s by 1. This is super duper important because that's the speed tier Kyogre and Groudon are both at. Means you will outspeed them all the time, every time. So if they want to do Foul Play things, if they want to do Swords Dance things on the turn before, you can just Foul Play into that and then take out the Groudon. You can Snarl before a Kyogre if they don't have like Tailwind or Electro Web or whatever speed control alongside it. This also means that you can just like Oblivion Wing certain things before it becomes a problem. Extra recovery is always good. Overall, though, we're playing Assault Vest just because we want to be very, very bulky. One of the cool things about the Sun teams is they don't really utilize Assault Vest very often. So having free access to an item like that for one of your restricteds is very, very powerful, and kind of just influences the team building a little bit. I know like people like to play Groudon and Zacian together. Groudon Ho-Oh something's been very, very popular here lately. Groudon Kyurem White and as a third option. But most of the time, outside of Zacian, obviously, those other Pokemon really want some of the items that your Sun team really wants. So Yveltal really wanting that Assault Vest most of the time means that you're not taking an item away from your very powerful Sun abusers. Next up, we have Groudon. Groudon is the opposite of Kyogre. Sets Sun, it's really offensively bulky, really offensively focused, high attack stat, high defense stat, suffers a little bit in the special defense stat. Still base 670 stats, nothing to sneeze at, just 10 points behind Yveltal. And what makes Groudon tick really is the ability to just be bulky and set up. We all know the fear of a Swords Dance Groudon. It's going to put itself to +1 or +2 depending on Intimidate stats and things like that. One of my favorite sets is White Herb with Swords Dance. Is just like, oh, you're going to intimidate me? Well, I'm going to remove that and then go to +2 and then boom, Dynamax, blow up whatever's in front of me. That's one of the cool things that Groudon gets away with doing, being that bulky offensive Pokemon. And now they do help each other a little bit, but there is one big glaring thing that Sun's weak to that Yveltal doesn't help against, and that's just a big ice weakness. We'll talk about this a little bit later in team building and strengths and weaknesses and whatnot, But this Groudon and Yveltal are both really weak to ice, and you want to play Venusaur, which is also really weak to ice. So you really have to remember that when you're team building, and try not to overstep and make sure you have good checks for that kind of thing. Looking at movesets for Groudon here, we have an Adamant Speedy set. Now, depending on your team, how you're wanting to play it, you may want less speed and more bulk, or less speed and more attack. I personally like having that extra speed. Overall, though, you have really good HP investment. You don't need a ton of attack investment because you're looking to click Sword Stance a lot of the time. A lot of your first turn plays will be probably Venusaur doing something, and then you're clicking Sword Stance. Because your opponent can't focus both at the same time outside of Calyrex Ice, you kind of just want to utilize that to your advantage. Really, some decent defense and special defense investment that kind of help live some of the non-super effective hits a little bit easier. Helps against some of the water type attacks while you're in Sun. Running Citrus Berry gives you that extra little bit of bulk. You could always run White Herb or Assault Vest on this as well. Instead of running it on your Yveltal, you could run pretty much any item on Groudon and probably be fine. Obviously, you have other ways to attack here. You have steel coverage and fire coverage and other things if you're looking to play a Dynamax Groudon. But the most basic sets just run Rock Slide, Precipice Blades as their main forms of damage. I want to talk about an example team before we move on here. I know you probably all have seen this before. This is the Yvel-don Joe UX9 special. We saw this team pop up a ton in the big Victor Road tournament with like 500 players. There were some really cool teams in that event, but this one stood out the most. I think this is one of the most used teams. I think at 9 copies. This has Yveltal Groudon, Tapu Koko, Bronzong, Venusaur, and Incineroar. So what we see in Sun teams a lot is a flying type, or like a ground immunity paired alongside Groudon and Venusaur, and like usually Incineroar. That ground immunity kind of flips-flops back and forth. Sometimes it's Landorus, sometimes it's Charizard. In the case of this team, we're looking at Yveltal and Bronzong as both being ground immunities, which are kind of cool. They kind of help you against opposing Groudon, opposing Landorus, and things like that, because you do have things like Incineroar, who are weak to ground and really want that check. And like I mentioned, you really want to make sure you're not overstepping and make sure you have really good ice checks on this team. You don't have a lot of good steel types since you're not playing Zacian. So the next best thing obviously is Bronzong. No, I would look at other steel types. Bronzong's cool. It's not the greatest niche. We saw it a little bit in Series 11 as a decent check into opposing Zacian. And especially now that they're not playing Close Combat or Sacred Sword, you may be able to just wall up in front of a Zacian and it just can't touch you. Beyond that, we also have Incineroar here, who's also a really good ice check. It's also just a really good Calyrex ice check, being able to intimidate and parting shot out and kind of cycle against it. The other cool part about this team was this Tapu Koko. The one weird thing is it kind of is counterproductive with your Venusaur, so you can't really sleep powder if Koko's been on the field, and you have no good way of changing to rain outside of that. So definitely have to keep that in mind when you're playing with it. But this Koko is physically offensive with Life Orb. I think it has like U-Turn, Brave Bird, and Wild Charge. So you can reset terrain, you can max Airstream, you can max Flutterby into like a grass type or into a dark type and even to just drop special attacks sometimes. So that's something that's really, really cool. So this team in particular does a very good job of checking that big ice weakness with Bronzong and Incineroar. But one of the big keys is making sure that you can still output that offensive pressure, because you do have just matchups that you just almost always ought to lose to. The big one that stands out to me is anything with Kyurem White. Kyurem White is a very powerful Pokemon. It's very, very fast. It has a very high special attack stat, so even Assault Vest Yveltal can struggle against it, and you almost don't outspeed it because you are never max speed Yveltal, while they are almost always max speed Kyurem White. So you need to be very, very aware of what your weaknesses are when you're team building, and especially with this duo, kind of make sure that you plan ahead for that kind of thing. Um, this isn't a plug and play and kind of team. This is a very skill intensive team. I feel like this duo overall just really wants you to know what your capabilities are, know your limits, try not to overstep them, and you'll be rewarded with really good wins because this is a very bulkier, slower, passive kind of play. You're wanting to click that sword stance button. You're wanting to click that snarl button. You want to wait till your opponent sets up so you can click foul play. You're not Zacian clicking Behemoth Blade into your opponent's Pokemon every turn. Like, there's teams for that kind of thing, and they do that really, really well. This is not it. Groudon and Yveltal just really need that extra little bit of time to get set up, get that damage mitigated, get into a better position depending on your opponent's leads, and from there you can probably take over the game pretty well. And with that being said, I want to thank you all for hanging out and listening to me ramble about Yvel-don this week. Like I said, next week we'll talk about Lightsaber since it tied, and your poll will be for the Friday episode after that. I'm not sure what's on it quite yet, but we'll figure it out when we get there. Make sure to check us out on Twitter, speaking of the poll, at LR Lessons, at Mr. Missouri 25, and at Musical VGC. Make sure to check out the Discord link in the description down below. We are getting ready to start our Series 12 events here soon. Would love you to come and join us for that kind of stuff. There's going to be ladder tours and best of 3 events. You can even challenge just single players in the dojo, which is something that's really, really cool. That'll all be up on our Discord if you're interested in that. And remember to hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications for when new videos go live. It helps us out a lot. And with that being said, we will see you all on Sunday with some Pokemon Legends Arceus stuff. Bye, everyone.